Hey guys, welcome back to another YouTube video. On today's video, guys, I am going to be doing a review on the new historical drama by Ridley Scott, Napoleon. Now, before I get on to this review, make sure you guys stay tuned. As you know, I'm on the grind for getting to 50 movies watched in theaters this year. And as this year as the rest of this year continues, it's seeming more and more plausible that could happen. Right now, I'm at 40, and so I need to watch 10 more movies in theaters by the ending of the year to get there. I'm also going to be watching a lot of movies on streaming as well for the rest of the year, just to maximize the amount of movies I have watched. And obviously, as you know, there's going to be a lot of rankings coming at the ending of the year. So make sure you stay tuned for all of that. There's going to be movie content coming out every week because I'm going to be constantly watching movies day in and day out. And so, yeah, make sure you stay tuned for all of that. I think that's all the announcements that I really need to make. I am recording this on Thanksgiving, so happy Thanksgiving. I hope you guys had a great meal for Thanksgiving. And yeah, let's get on to this review. So we have yet again another like historical drama, biopic, whatever you want to call it, kind of in that category of films. We've had quite a few this year, and I've been joking around with my friend about how there's just like coincidentally been a ton of like those types of movies coming out this year. We've had Oppenheimer, obviously, which was a huge one, Killers of the Flower Moon, which did pretty well. And then of course we have Napoleon, and next month we have a movie called The Boys in the Boat, which I do actually want to check out as well. So quite a year for historical dramas, and so that might be an idea for a ranking at the ending of the year. And so yeah, Napoleon, I found out about this movie when we put up a poster for it at my theater, and I was I was excited for it. I was like, yep, I'm going to see this movie. Obviously, Napoleon, a very, very prominent historical figure, you know, mostly looked at as the greatest emperor in human history. And when the trailers came out, it looked even better than what I initially expected when I first saw the poster. With just the brutal battle sequences, I was like, there's going to be blood and violence, and I'm going to love it. And so, yeah, I was very, very excited going into this movie. Watched a couple of reviews before I went into it, and I was like, okay, these seem like reasonable reasonable criticisms to the movie, and overall I would say I came out with the same consensus as pretty much everybody else did. So getting on to the positives, obviously first off, as I already talked about, the battle sequences, how were those? Very, very, very great. Very visually stunning. They looked some of them looked very, very beautiful. Particularly the standout one for me was the opening one, which was like the first battle that kind of gained Napoleon's notoriety, and like how he started to come into fruition and becoming more and more of a prominent figure as he kept winning and winning these battles, and, you know, coming to higher positions over time. And this one in particular takes place at night, and you have like cannonballs being fired off. It's they're attacking this ship, I believe, and it just looks visually just very, very stunning. When the cannonballs are being fired off, it literally looks like fireworks. It looks really, really amazing. But at the same time, there can be some really, really horrific parts to it when people are actually dying. Even like horses are getting shot by these cannonballs, and they just get these big, huge wounds in them, and it looks very, very gruesome. And so you do have moments like that as well. So, I really liked how the battle sequences played out. There was another one where I believe they were, it was the advancement in Russia, and it's like, it takes place on this frozen lake, whatever, body of water, and Napoleon and his army are shooting off fireballs, and they're landing on top of the ice, and it's obviously, you know, cracking it open and creating these openings, and so these soldiers will like fall in there, and there's a bunch of blood, and, you know, you see even horses fall into there as well. Like, it's really, really horrific, but at the same time, everything's shot very, very well. It's very these battle sequences are very, very exhilarating. Overall, I think they just did a really, really good job at capturing the battle sequences, and I also think that they were spaced nicely throughout the movie as well. Another positive that I have for this movie is I think that the set pieces and the costume designs, all of that did a really, really good job at capturing the tone of this movie and making it feel like you are actually in the 18th and early 19th century. Just did a really, really good job at establishing that tone. I am a big fan of 18th century history, and so, just all the little small details in this film, I think they did it right. And if you read into history, or you're really into history, it's just really, really nice when you're watching this movie and you just see all those small details that they nailed really, really nicely throughout this film, that if you are into history, you'll understand, and you'll know, like, hey, that was something that what happened in that time period, and this is what people did in that time period, and all that kind of stuff. So they just did a really good job at capturing that time period and establishing that tone. All the settings, very, very great. Costume designs, all that kind of stuff, I think was done very, very greatly. My third positive of this movie, I think that our two main leads did a really, really good job. Joaquin Phoenix as Napoleon and Vanessa Kirby as Josephine. And similar to Oppenheimer, I'm surprised I didn't compare this movie a lot more to Oppenheimer throughout this review, but I tried to stray away from that. But, kind of like with Oppenheimer, I just think that Joaquin Phoenix did a really, really good job at portraying Napoleon and showing that, some of these very, very prominent figures are not, perfect, and their lives were not perfect, and all, sunshine and rainbows and whatnot. I just think he did a really, really good job at that, where Napoleon is very, very focused on his work and his position as a general and an emperor, and he cares deeply about that. And when he is, when he does have a battle that sets out, he is kind of in this particular mindset where he has to win this. And while also when he's kind of outside of that, he's kind of like a normal guy. Like, I think they did a really, really good job at showing, like, just because just because they lived in the 18th century doesn't mean that they're much different from men nowadays. Like, they're still very, very similar. They still have the kind of similar flaws that modern day men do. And so I'm not going to get into detail about it or whatever, but you'll know what I mean if you did watch this movie, or when you do happen to see this movie, if you are planning on seeing it. And so I just thought that I just liked how they did that in this movie. It was slightly different from Oppenheimer, because with Oppenheimer, Cillian Murphy or whatever showed how, like, I mean, yeah, he created this nuclear bomb, but how much of an effect that put on him. Whereas in this movie, it's kind of like Napoleon, very, very focused on his work, but at the same time, even though he's one of these big prominent figures, emperors of the 18th century, he's still kind of like relatable in a way, because he's still kind of like modern men in many, many ways. Like, outside of his war work and everything like that, on the romance side of things, he's still very much like men nowadays. And so I just thought that was kind of interesting. And then Vanessa Kirby as Josephine, I think she did a really, really good job. She's been appearing in a lot of movies in the past few years, and I liked her in this movie. I think she did a really, really good job. My fourth positive for this movie is the dry humor in this movie. And the interesting thing is that now, I do I'm particularly a fan of dark humor, as I talked about with Thanksgiving, but I also do like some dry humor as well. And I think it worked particularly well, kind of like with Thanksgiving, with like the dark humor in Thanksgiving. I think it worked particularly well in that movie because it is a horror slasher. In this movie, I think the dry humor worked very, very well, because in a movie where things are so serious and, more mature, and this, it's taking place in the 18th century, the dry humor just landed that much better, because characters could be having a completely normal conversation, and then out of nowhere, like, things just kind of go off of that serious level, and a character says something that somebody would say nowadays if they were having a conversation. You're just like, whoa. And so I just think it worked particularly well in this movie, because the tone is established very, very well. And so when characters stray away from that seriousness and from that tone, it's usually when they're trying to land a joke, and it just works that much better. I don't know how to describe it. I know I probably didn't describe that the best, but that's kind of the best way I can explain it, is that it just worked particularly well in this movie because it is such a serious movie. Like, the tone is very, very serious throughout most of the movie, and so when it does stray away from it, it just lands really, really well, and it felt like, if you've ever read like any old any old literature or poetry or Shakespeare like literature or whatever, some of the like very, very similar to the types of jokes in that type of literature. And so I thought they did a really, really good job with the humor in this movie. It worked very, very well for me. Moving on from the positives and actually going straight to the negatives, because there's nothing that I can really think of off the top of my head that would go in the mixed category for Napoleon. So probably my main issue with this movie, and the only negative that I have for this movie, but it is certainly a bigger one, is that on outside of the battle sequences and whatnot, on the story side of things, on the actual story, I'm never really sure where Napoleon's trying to go. It kind of feels like it doesn't really have much of an identity. I'm not sure if it's trying to be a continuous monologue of the events that happened in Napoleon's life, where we're just going through main events like, the big battles and like just big moments in his life and not really connecting much together. It's just kind of like a timeline. Or if we're trying to create an actual story where, yes, we have obviously the big events, we're showing the big events, but we're showing how they affected his life, how it led to the next one, how all this connects together, the development of his character, all that kind of stuff. All that kind of stuff that you would see in any other normal movie. I would have been okay with either one. I don't mind, watching a continuous monologue where it's just showing them the big events of his life, because I think if they would have gone for that, they would have had more time to just show more battle sequences and whatnot, and which I would have no problem with, because they did an excellent job with that. But the problem is that they try to spend a lot of time on the story side of things as well, mainly focusing on his romance and his relationship with Josephine, and they kind of show how it affects like his life as a general, because he wants to obviously pass his power to the future generations by having kids, but his wife is not able to have kids, despite all of their efforts, we'll just put it that way, in this movie. And so we kind of see how that affects his war life, I guess you can say, because he wants to have a kid to pass on his power to, but he can't. But other than that, I don't know. There's just not really a whole lot to dish out here, really. And so, yeah, like I said, the problem comes in the fact that this movie doesn't really have an identity. I don't think it knows where it's trying to go on the story level. I wish that, if anything, they would have just sticked with the monologue / timeline part, so that they could have just focused on the battle sequences. But they throw in a lot of that romance and try to show how it affects his other side of him, which is being a general and an emperor of France. And I don't know, I just don't think that they get there all the way. And so it feels like we just wasted a lot of time in this movie on that, when we could have spent, because I would say probably a good half of this movie, nearly half of this movie, probably spent on the actual story side of things. It feels like all that time was just kind of wasted, because we just never really got anywhere with it. And so, I don't know, it just doesn't feel like anything's really connected in this movie in that sense. We kind of just go from talking about his love life to now he's in a big battle. He wins the battle, back to his love life, and it just keeps doing that throughout the entire movie. And so, yeah, it's kind of stuck in this weird place where it's not really sure where it's trying to go on a story level. Overall, I think as far as the runtime goes, Napoleon does end up feeling a little bit bloated, because we spend so much time on the story side of things without really getting anywhere. I don't want to leave things on a bad note, though. I still think that Napoleon was a pretty solid film. It doesn't undermine any of the the great things that I really, really liked about this movie. I still had a heck of a time with it. And so, overall, I think out of 10, I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10. I don't think I can give it anything higher than that, with the story just not really being handled the greatest. But if it was, it could have easily been one of the highest rated movies for me of the year. So yeah, Napoleon, I would definitely still check it out in theaters. You're gonna love the battle sequences. If you're like a historical, you're really into history or whatever, you're gonna like this movie as well. So yeah, didn't want to leave on a bad note with Napoleon. I still really enjoyed it. And so yeah, make sure you stay tuned for the future content. There's gonna be a lot of movie related content coming your way for the rest of the year. And I think that's pretty much it. I want to be done with this video because I did a lot of retakes. And so, yeah, like and subscribe, guys. Let's get out of here. I'll see you next time.